In this lesson, we're going to talk about fractions. And we're just going to go over the basics, what a fraction is, how to simplify them or reduce them. And we're going to talk about mixed numbers. So first of all, fractions are just part of a whole. So if I have 1/2 of something, that means I'm cutting it in half. If I have 1/3 of something, I'm cutting it into thirds or 3 pieces and so forth. We might also recall that if I have 2/4, that's the same thing as 1/2. So we have this idea of equivalent fractions. So fractions can be bigger than 1. So if I have 3 objects and they're each cut into fourths, I can shade in 2 of them, and then I can shade in 1/4 of the other, and that would be 2 whole plus 1/4. So that's 2 and 1/4. And let's talk about some simplifications. So you might remember back in the day, you're always told to simplify your fractions, right? So if you look at something like 4/6, you might recognize that 4 is 2 times 2, and that 6 is 2 times 3. And we know that if I divide something by itself, I get 1. So 2 divided by 2 is really just 1. So it's kind of just a 1 times 2/3. And that just gives me 2/3. And that's how we simplify fractions. They're not always that straightforward, though. Sometimes you'll have something like, let's say, 18/24, and you're asked to simplify 18/24. Or you're doing some work, you come up with 18/24 as a solution, and you know that you need to simplify this. There's 2 ways of going about it. Most of the time, we're going to take multiple steps. That includes me and pretty much everybody else you talk to. If you might recognize at the top and bottom, those are both even numbers. So 18 is 2 times 9, and then 2 times 12 for 24. And that gives me 9/12. And if you think about that for a second, you say, wait a minute. I know I can remove common factors from that. And 9 is 3 times 3. And 12 is 3 times 4. So I'm going to get 3 times 3 over 3 times 4. And that's going to simplify to 3/4. And it's how we're more often than not, that's how we're going to do that. But some people might recognize that 18 and 24 have something bigger in common. So if I'm looking at 18 over 24, well, that's 3 times 6 and 4 times 6, because I know that 6 divides 18 and I know 6 divides 24. Turns out 6 is what we call the greatest common factor of those 2 numbers, because it's the largest number that will divide into them evenly without going over. And if you can identify the greatest common factor, you get your simplification in 1 step. Is that required? No, it's not required, but it helps a lot. And I want to talk about looking at mixed numbers real quick. If I have 4 and 1/3, the way we can think about that, or one of the ways we can think about that, is just visually. If I have 4 objects that are filled in and 1/3 of another one, that's 4 and 1/3. This is literally 4 plus 1/3, right? Well, sometimes it's useful to have this in terms of what we call an improper fraction. It's a lot easier to work with in algebra class. For most situations. And one way we can think about that visually, if I go in and split each one of those up into thirds, I'm going to have 3/3, 6/3, 9/3, and 12/3, right? So this 4 would really be 12/3 plus 1/3, and that's going to be 13/3. I usually don't teach shortcuts, but there's a nice one here that once you recognize what's going on here with this picture and how to get 13/3, there's a quick shortcut. If you multiply the whole number by the denominator, you're going to get 12. That's not a coincidence. There are 12/3 going on here. And then you add it to the numerator. So the other way to go about it, 4 1/3 is equal to 4 times 3 plus 1 over 3. And that's 13/3. And that is a trick that's going to work every single time you need to convert a mixed number into an improper fraction. You can go the other way. If I'm looking at 13/3, that's 4 1/3. How do I get there? Well, you do some division. 3 goes into 13. That goes in 4 times. And with the 12, remainder 1. And that is the whole number. And that's the numerator. And that stays as your denominator. And that is how you work with mixed numbers. And I'll see you in the next video when we talk about adding and subtracting and, or not adding and subtracting, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction come after.